You're listening to The Reality Check, episode 407, recorded June 30th, 2016.
This is your reality check.
Hello, listeners. This is The Reality Check, your weekly Canadian show which explores scientific controversies and curiosities. I'm your temporary host, Adam Gardner, and joining me this week are, well, a couple of cats. The rest of the regular panelists are taking the week off as we continue to prepare for our move to radio. As you're probably aware, TRC will be moving to SiriusXM, channel 167 Canada Talks, in a few weeks. The regular show will return to your podcast feed a few days after this first episode airs. This week, I'm going to be giving you guys another mashup. This was a big cost-saving strategy for sitcoms and anime back in the 80s and 90s, where they just use old clips and some low-cost bumpers instead of making new materials. Apparently, I'm the low-cost bumper. Hope you enjoy it. The theme I'd like to tackle this week is times that we've disagreed. So in general, we all share very similar views on most of the major issues on this show. It just happens that most of the things we talk about don't have much of a legitimate other side to the story. Homeopathy is a crock of garbage, so none of us are going to argue otherwise. But occasionally, we do have some more nuanced ideas. In the segments I'm going to revisit, we had some level of disagreement between the panelists, and there was sort of an open discussion and debate over these, and this is always good. So you might get a warped view of us thinking that we always argue just by listening to this show, so try to remember that in most of our other episodes, we generally get along and agree with each other. First, we go back to episode 42 of our podcast. This was way back in 2009. Darren covered an interesting topic: do geeks wear glasses? The segment itself is a bit dated, as I think the culture around wearing glasses has changed a bit since then. Growing up, I feel there was more of a stigma around wearing glasses than there is now. People seem to be wearing them more out of choice, out of style than they used to. So anyway, have a listen and see where some of this conflict came in.
Who wear glasses geeks? University of Melbourne's Centre for Eye Research Australia conducted a study examining myopia, or short-sightedness, which is a complex eye condition which affects about 1 in 4 Australians, so about 25%. The study used the university's Australian Twin Registry, which, as you can imagine, is a huge database of twins, and this led to the assessment of 633 twins and a comparative group of 278 family members, and they were involved in this study of over a 4-year period. So, obviously, they looked at people who had glasses and who didn't for myopia, and they examined all participants with basically a personality assessment of the 5 major personality factors: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
When you mean the 5?
In psychology, there's come to be agreement over the past several decades of these main personality factors, and that's why they're known as the Big 5. Results revealed that the comparison of family members and twins showed no link between myopia and introversion. However, there was a significant but small association with myopia and agreeableness. So this basically means that people who wear glasses are not demonstrating personality traits which are typically associated with people who are nerds or geeks. That's done. Pseudo myth busted.
So this study was looking for correlations, right?
Yes.
So it's not going to find out whether or not one causes the other.
Right.
Right.
And certainly some people who wear glasses are geeks or nerds, and some people aren't.
But you would expect.
And there's also the issue of myopia, right? They're just looking at the relationship between myopia.
Right, so there are other visual problems which could cause you to have glasses.
And there's also the issue that not everyone who has myopia chooses glasses as the solution. So it may be actually just a style issue, too.
Yeah, I think
that geeks may be more likely to choose glasses over contact lenses.
Absolutely. Right. More extroverted people are more concerned about what people think about their appearance. They're more likely to get contact.
But apparently there isn't even a correlation.
That would only work then the other way, then. It would even more validate the invalidity of this.
No.
More extroverted people who are more concerned about how I think geeks are less concerned with how they look. Look at the clothes they wear.
So what I'm trying to say, if more extroverted people would likely get glasses, they would be in here.
More extroverted.
Sorry, more extroverted would more likely get contacts.
Yes.
Then they wouldn't be part of the study. So those extroversion people would not be part of the sample. Thus, this is even more valid as a result.
Introverted people are the geeks. They're the ones that wear glasses.
I think you can make the argument the other way.
I thought the study was
absolutely true. You look at people, and if they're wearing glasses, it's because they don't think appearance is that important.
What I'm trying to say is you're removing an extroversion possible sample, right?
Yeah.
But the overall result is still they're not introverted.
So they only studied people who wore glasses? Like what? I'm a little
No, they
confused.
started studying myopic people.
They studied myopic people, so it would include people who wear glasses and wear contact lenses.
And don't forget that if you get judged as a geek, then you're more likely to turn to more geeky and nerdy things because you wear glasses. People are more likely to fall into.
You guys
the social
don't want
pressures
this segment.
Did you amplification?
No,
are you guys paying attention to Darren?
I agree with the lack of a link between myopia and
I said it would be,
but I'm saying there's a lot of other factors.
And I realize there's other factors. What I'm trying to say to you is, if you're looking at a certain sample and you remove a certain extroversion part of the sample, and the resulting sample, which you're saying is more neurotic, still shows no balance with neuroticism, then it even more validates the study.
My question is, why are those people being removed?
I'm not even saying they are. I'm just addressing the hypothetical claim of Adams.
I think you're confusing the hypothetical.
No, this is a critical thinking claim. I don't necessarily agree with his premise, but I'm accepting it.
This
and still showing
has
why it's
gone
false.
way off the rails. I have no idea what the are you guys talking about.
I could have done this in 3 minutes. I really think you don't have a valid point.
I don't even know what
yours is.
It's very simple. There's no link between myopia and introversion.
But we're not even talking about myopia. We're talking about glasses.
Yes.
Forget about it.
And that's the point. That's what I said. Pseudo-myth busted.
I'm saying glasses versus
then
contacts.
You'll have to find a different study which uses...
The study doesn't address that.
People, there is a good reason for which people who choose to wear glasses are going to be more introverted, more geeky, more antisocial.
And it turns out they're still not.
Why?
But that study doesn't deal with that at all.
Why?
It only deals with myopic
What we need is the datum I don't have.
Exactly. That's what
how many
study, and that's why the myth's not busted. Is our point?
I said pseudo-myth busted. I did.
Well, pseudo-myth.
See, I think it's a more interesting question about whether or not nerds actually need glasses more. Let's talk about the need for glasses, right? So I think it's an interesting question. Do nerds have poorer eyesight?
Also, I do want to say, secondly, and this is a different study, and this is for you parents who might have kids who might get glasses and are worried about it. Kids think other kids with glasses are smart and honest, and the glasses themselves are seemingly irrelevant to ratings of attractiveness. So, if you have a child that is worried about how they are going to look with glasses, you can say research indicates they are seen as smart and honest. Glasses, at least for myopia, do not indicate personality traits typically associated with geekiness. People who talk about myopia and geekiness on podcasts, on the other hand...
Following the recording of that segment, there was a lengthy argument which isn't heard in the actual show. So as I had stated, I contended that there was a big difference between an eye condition, which would potentially lead one to wear glasses, and the actual wearing of glasses. Basically, in a society in which there is a stigma to wear glasses, someone may be more or less likely to choose to wear glasses over contacts based on other priorities. The research didn't really tackle this, which is why the title of the episode mentioned myopic myths, and that the description mentions needing glasses rather than wearing glasses. Darren had even recorded this follow-up.
Addendum. Approximately 24 hours ago, I presented a segment that indicated that people who wear glasses do not have personality traits typically associated with geekiness. There was much discussion about the validity of using myopia, or short-sightedness, as a proxy for wearing glasses. I had made the assumption that the study which examined myopia and personality traits also examined glasses wearing, but after contacting the author of the study today, they did not. Consequently, the information presented still holds for myopia, but one should remain agnostic about anything else. This is because there could be a subset of the myopic population studied that wears contacts or does not wear glasses. I believe this was Adam's point. And their reasons for doing so might be because of different personality traits. Yet this has not been demonstrated either, so the listener should just conclude that myopia is not significantly correlated with the personality traits of introversion and neuroticism. What can we learn here? Well, first, the beauty of critical thinking and skepticism is that one should have an open mind and be ready to change their beliefs. In this case, good reasons were provided to do so, so that is why I decided to do this addendum, because at the reality check, we are trying to present the most accurate information that we can. As the initial segment was a bit misleading, it was important to offer this correction. While one could try to say that most people with myopia would wear glasses, so the study would be valid, this notion is not supported by evidence. The world, facts, decide what is true, not our opinions. Secondly, we can learn that this is another wonderful example of how the media reports stories. Nearly every article about this finding reports it as, quote, people who wear glasses aren't geeks. But it can only be said that, quote, people with myopia do not have personality traits that are typically associated with geekiness. Quote, once again, be very wary of headlines. Remember, critical thinking is not an end result, but a continuous process.
Now, it's easy to be stubborn at a topic, but it takes a science-minded person to be able to update their opinion based on further research. So it's really great that Darren thought this way and had that follow-up, and this is generally the kind of process that we like to approach most topics when we look at them. Ultimately, I think this is a complex topic that I think could benefit from a follow-up. There's since been numerous studies on the topic. Some stuff I read suggests a link between myopia and education. I've also seen assumptions that nearsightedness will discourage a person from playing outdoors and encourage them to read, which I think would need some evidence to support it. I've also seen suggestions that glasses mask some facial cues that people use to read others, which could lead to an assumption that they're smart. All of this would mean more attention and investigation than I can do in this mashup, so perhaps this is something we can delve into in a future show. The next topic I'd like to cover is 0.999 repeating equals 1. This was a segment that Elon did years ago, and although everyone seems to fundamentally agree on the idea, there was a lot of debate over the concept in that segment.
Well, okay, maybe this sounds like a weird segment, and to those non-mathematically inclined people, it seems kind of intuitively obvious that 0.99999, like, forever nines, is going to be less than 1, right? Because it starts with 0 point something, and anything 0 point something is going to be less than 1, right, guys?
I currently believe that.
I believe it is intuitive. I'm not going to agree with the statement, obviously.
Let's go to a Yahoo Answers knockoff called
Not
Jigamin.
even Yahoo Answers?
No, I found
a knockoff of Yahoo Answers.
What's it called?
Jigamin.
Jigamin. Sounds like a Pokemon.
I posted a link in the show notes. So someone posted a poll asking, is 1 equal to a 0.999 repeating forever? So out of 77 respondents, it was a poll, 39 said that the numbers are equal, and 38 said that they are not. So it was pretty much a dead heat. Yeah, so luckily we live in a time where questions of scientific or mathematical natures can be answered using, science or math, and not by a mob of idiots, which is nice.
Well, wait, half that mob is correct, and the other half is a mob of idiots, so...
Right. Yeah. Or sarcastic people.
Yes, true.
Yeah, there might have been, someone put on the message board, let's go vote no on this, guys, because people who only have a 4th grade understanding of math and not a 6th grade understanding of math won't understand the complexities of this issue or some crap like that.
As Jack Layton might have said, 0.9 equals 1, #fail.
Well, you guys are going to be surprised when I throw some scientific studies at you later. But before that, let's get to the fascinating truth of it, which is that these two numbers are exactly equal.
No my God.
Way. Right?
39 people were correct.
I still don't believe you. I'm willing to be convinced, though.
Yeah, let's hear more evidence.
There's lots of ways to prove that 0.9 repeating forever is equal to 1. So I'm going to tell you one way. I'm sure you guys all have your own ways. So, okay, what's 1 divided by 9?
0.1. No, it's 1.11111. Correct.
No. 0.1 repeating.
Oh, 1 by 9. Yeah, 0.1111.
Okay, yeah. 1 divided by 9 equals 0.111 forever, right?
Yes.
No, wait.
Yes.
No. 1 over 9 equals 0. Num 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 num.
Nice.
Redemption. Minor redemption.
Are we going to do this for all 9, or are you going to skip a couple in the middle?
No, I'm gonna prove this to you guys.
Right.
I just asked you one question.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question.
All right. So we got on the left we're saying 1 over 9, and on the right we say it equals 0.111 forever. Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
So now let's multiply both sides by 9.
Oh my God.
So on the left we have 1 over 9 times 9. What's 1 over 9 times 9?
It's 9 over 9
1.
equals 1.
It's 9 over 9 equals 1. And on the right side we have 0.111 forever times 9. What's that going to equal?
0.999 forever equals 1.
So there you go. So that means you have on the left 1 equals 0.999.
Do you think the people on Jigaloo all did this in their heads?
I still don't agree with that.
You don't agree with
Wait,
that?
you're tricking. This is a trick.
Hey, it does sound like
I haven't figured it out yet. It's a trick.
It's not a trick. 1/3 times 3. It's the same thing.
You can't multiply a repeating decimal.
Why the hell not?
By a non-repeating number.
It's repeat.
That makes the.
Well, you can.
You can totally do it. We just did it.
We just did it.
Wait, can you multiply pi by a number?
Yes.
Oh,
How? If you don't know what pi is, how can you multiply it?
Well, that's eventually, yeah, you'd have to round. Yes, in a way you can multiply.
But you can use formulas
That's
to.
why I use the algebra of it.
You can use formulas to determine pi. You can slap a 2 in front of that.
Right. But what Elan is saying is that x equals y, right?
What?
Well,
John, are you actually arguing with me, or are you just trying to be a smartass?
The second.
Okay.
give me another. Give me another way.
Okay, I can respond to this. Okay, basically there have been studies that show, which I was going to get to later, but I'll get to it now because I didn't realize that I'd get arguments from you on this.
Damn right.
That people tend to have problems understanding that 0.9 all repeating is just a number and not a process. People think of it as if it's an actual, like, you're saying a formula, like keep putting nines, keep on putting nines. It's a whole thing. Actually, no, it's just a number that approaches infinity. You're having nines forever until infinity, and that's actually just a number. It's the same as saying 3 over 3 equals 1. That's the same as saying 0.9.
No. See, I don't think it's quite the same because infinity is a concept. Even though the 0.999 is not a process, it is an actual number. Infinity is more of a concept. So yeah, 999 going to infinity goes to 1. But 9999 is not 1. That's where I currently still stand.
If you add the repeating, then it becomes
you get infinities involved.
All right, let me give you another proof then. Okay, what's 8 over 9?
0.88888 repeating.
Right, and what's 1 over 9?
0.111 repeating.
So it's 8 over 9 plus 1 over 9.
9 ninths makes 1.
It's kind of the same proof.
Yeah.
Same proof.
That's sort of the same as the first one. Do you have a different one?
Okay, 1 over 3.
Yeah, anything divided by itself is 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. 0 divided by 0 is 1. Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, no.
All right, you guys got to trust me. Well, I was about to make fun of people who said stupid things on Jiggaman, but you guys have pretty much said the stupid things, so I don't really need to.
You guys, I've been on the equals 1 side the whole time, Elan. Let's be fair.
I'm aware.
By the way, I just took a peek at Elan's notes for the segment, and he's got 0.999 going on for like 1,000 decimal places.
He's got like a paragraph. It's
just to cover himself.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's a quote from. So, anyways, back on Jiggaman, there was one guy who commented that disagreed with the results of the poll. And he said, "Oh, but it isn't because it isn't 1. It's 0.999." And then he had like pages and pages of nines. And then at the end, he ended by saying, "See, it looks nothing like 1." So Kirk Weller et al. Performed an experiment in 2005 in southern Florida, and they were testing. Basically, in the experiment, they were testing a new way of teaching about the relationship between decimals and fractions. And while their methods drastically improved the results, a striking fact was that at the start of the study, 70% of the participants said that 0.999 didn't equal 1. And this was a study which was of a bunch of elementary and middle school math teachers.
Ooh.
So they were able to help them learn how to think of it in such a way that they realized that the numbers were equal. But before the study started, they started 70% thinking they weren't equal. So that just shows that a lot of people have trouble grasping this concept. And the study takes a deep dive into the different ways people think about fractions and decimals, and I encourage interested listeners to give her a read. I've linked to it on the show notes. So to conclude, now you know 0.999, all repeating, is in fact equal to 10 over 10, which is equal to 5 to the power of 0, which is equal to log base 10 of 10, which is equal to 1. Booms.
Now, does that mean you'd also say 1.9 repeating is equal to 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Which would be like 1.
Yeah, it's 1 plus 1.
1 over 3
let's put it
plus
this
1
way.
over 3 plus 1
I
over 3
understand the utility of infinities because that's how you do calculus and many other things, but I'm still not comfortable with it. And as a consequence...
Infinity? It's extremely powerful.
Yeah, I know, to infinity. But the point is, it is a concept.
Ooh, Darren, I have a good way to prove it to you. Ready for this? I'm going to prove by example, I guess, or by contradiction. Think of a number between 0.999 all repeating and 1.
You just come up with that?
Boom.
It's 1 minus 0.0 all repeating with a 1 at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
1 minus infinity minus 0.1.
Boom, Dubrovsky.
How can you have 0 repeating forever, but then have a 1 at the end?
Think about it, Dubrovsky. That's why it's the middle number.
After recording this, I really thought this would be the last of it, but for years we continued to argue about it. We kept getting feedback from readers on the question, and every time it would spark some internal debate about the concept, sort of how universal it was and how did we cover it. I really hope we never have to cover this again, so much to say it remains the subject of occasional debate amongst us. Next up is a segment that guest presenter Jim Davies did on bike helmet safety. Xander had previously touched on the topic in the early days of the show, but it wasn't a full segment about that topic itself. Jim really fleshed out the idea and presented some convincing arguments. Wearing bike helmets is so ingrained in our culture that it's a hard topic to accept, and it's just natural to question it. So have a listen and see how we talked about it.
Okay, yeah, so I want to talk about helmets in general, and everybody reflect for a moment on what a helmet's for and when you think you should wear it. So a helmet's supposed to protect your head in case it gets hit. So it makes sense to wear a helmet when you're in a situation that's dangerous for hurting your head. And that's why we see helmets on construction workers and skateboarders, and we don't tend to see them on people, just walking down the street. So question about like whether or not you should wear a helmet when you're riding a bike should be the question, how dangerous is dangerous enough to wear a helmet for your head? And then is cycling that dangerous? And that's not a scientific question. That's a values question, really. How much risk are you willing to look for? Because, we can assume that wearing helmets all the time is both excessive but probably safer for our heads. But most people would be, I think I don't need to wear a helmet when I'm just driving to the store, for example, right? So the question I think that's important to ask is cycling dangerous enough to warrant wearing a helmet? And the only way to do that, since it's not really, it is a values question, is to look at it compared to other activities that we feel strongly that we should or shouldn't wear a helmet for, and help guide our reasoning that way. So there are a couple ways to look at it. So there's some interesting data on how safe cycling is. One of them, first of all, let's just acknowledge that in this culture, people see cycling as a dangerous activity. They just sort of perceive it as a dangerous thing. So they've done some neat studies of cycling and how dangerous it is. And one statistic I found that was really interesting is that cycling is safer than living.
What does that mean?
So,
how can you do one without the other?
Well, you can't. But if you look at people who, if you look at fatalities per million exposure hours, okay, living has 1.53 fatalities per million of exposure hours. And cycling has 0.26. So what that means is that if you are cycling, you are actually at less risk of dying than if you were to do anything, including cycling.
Right, but Jim, doesn't that first measurement include like people who are 100 years old who can't be cycling but are going to be dying very often?
Yeah, and babies and babies who are going to die of pneumonia and perfectly healthy people who are watching TV.
So it's an amusing stat, which he's not going to rest his case on.
We're not going to rest the case on the stat, but I will get back to it later when we talk about the health benefits of cycling.
Yes.
But motoring is 0.47 fatalities per million of exposure.
Which is also lower than...
Which is higher than cycling.
What was cycling again? Sorry?
0.26.
Oh.
So cycling, to give you an estimate, according to these statistics, it's about as dangerous as water skiing.
What?
And it's 55% as dangerous as motoring. So it's almost half as dangerous as driving a car.
Okay.
So here we have this thing. If you feel like wearing a helmet in a car is ridiculous, all right, then if you're going by safety reasons, then wearing a helmet on a bicycle is twice as ridiculous. Okay? Almost twice as ridiculous. And maybe more if you're riding a convertible. So anyway, cycling isn't really all that dangerous. Okay, now here's the interesting thing. If you look at it by the mile traveled, then driving is safer. So you got 0.06 fatalities per million miles for driving and 0.39 for cycling. So cycling is significantly more dangerous by the mile. Now, the question you got to ask now is, what is by the hour or by the mile the best way to look at it?
Or by the kilometer.
I would think it depends what you're trying to do. If you're doing it for transportation, I think distance traveled. But if you're doing it for recreation, then I think time.
That is not the right way to think about it, according to my opinion. I'll tell you why. One is that assumes that you're going to travel the same distance no matter what form of transportation you're using. But the fact is that people who use bikes for transportation make shorter trips. So my wife and I sold our car and took up cycling for our main transportation. And we use bus sometimes, but mainly cycling. Because we did it to save money. But we found that when we were thinking about going out to dinner, we were not going to drive all the way out to, the Red Lobster. That would be a half-an-hour drive.
Oh, I see.
We're going to go to a place that is bikeable. So really, and here's some further stuff that's really cool. Scientific American showed that people tend to commute about the same amount of time, no matter what their mode of transport is. It's about 66 minutes a day.
So if they live really far from their workplace, they're not going to take the bus because they kind of have to drive. Whereas if they live close, they might walk and whatever.
And
Well,
it makes it the same time. You're saying it compensates because walking and driving and biking and also cycling, it all works out?
I'm saying that they will change transportation, change jobs, or move to make their commute about 33 minutes each way.
That's interesting.
Okay. Well, if you live in a distant suburb and your job is downtown, you probably will not opt for a bike.
No,
that's definitely
Right? And
true.
if you had to move to a bike, you might change your job or your.
Yeah, and if you lived like 30 minutes away by walking to your work,
Right,
you'd probably walk.
We know that's going to be, I assume, a larger scale study, and I'm just wary of extrapolating those trends to individuals, because I know...
Oh, sure.
Certainly some people are willing to put up with an hour commute, and I would never at all.
Oh, and in Bangkok, they commute 3 hours on average. So, yes, I'm just using the individuals as examples for pedagogical purposes, but not for proof.
Sure.
So they tend to go that far. So really, the psychological effect of being on a bike and the distance you will travel means that people who are on bikes travel fewer miles than people who are in cars. So that calls into question the by the mile. Nonetheless, I will acknowledge that by the mile, a car is safer. But yes, people are more willing to drive to Florida than bike.
Right. So as a quick sort of summary, it changes your behavior such that even though it's safer by the mile, you're not traveling as many miles.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
And you also have to consider maybe someone is doing something that they wouldn't be able to if they are driving instead of biking. So there is a convenience factor that does come into it there.
And further, if this is true that people are actually sort of honing in on this 33 minutes per commute, then by the time is actually a decent way to look at safety. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they find that when you put in a superhighway, for example, people tend to move farther out.
Yeah, of course.
Instead of have a shorter commute, they'll move farther out because they're willing to have that 33 minutes. Okay. So we're looking at cycling as a means of transportation. When we're looking at it as a means of transportation, the way I look at it looks like it's a safer than driving, for example. It's based on how people behave when they take it up. So cycling is no more dangerous than driving. So if you're going to be rational, as I would hope listeners of your podcast would want to be, you should not wear a helmet. If you will not wear a helmet driving, you should not wear it biking.
Oh my.
Oh my.
Okay. Are we going to get a lawsuit?
And if you think that you definitely should be wearing a helmet when you're biking, well then you sure as hell better be wearing one when you're in a car.
Hell, you should be wearing two, or at least one that's 45 to 60% larger.
But Jim, seriously though, would a helmet help you in a car accident as much as a helmet would help you in a biking accident?
Probably.
You know what I mean?
Probably, but bike helmets are, as they're made, are pretty crappy in either case, which I'll get to.
So you would probably have a car helmet if you. If we lived in a culture of wearing a helmet in a car, you would not wear a bike helmet in a car. You would have a car helmet.
I'm just saying, like, if people like to say, well, you're safer with the helmet than without, then whatever, you want to put a piece of foam on your head in the car. Most people who die in cars die because of head injury.
Oh, okay. Right. So yes, that pretty much answers the question.
So should be
while you've got the bike helmet, you might as well throw it on when you're in the car or perhaps walking down the street too. People underestimate how dangerous walking.
I'm really curious to hear now if you're going to have a butt or if it's going to be the conclusion is you don't need to wear a helmet.
My conclusion is definitely that you don't need to wear a helmet.
Oh,
but I'm going to move. I don't wear a helmet and I think it's bad for public health. But
you don't even have hair. Like, I don't wear a helmet because I don't want to mess up my hair.
If I wear a helmet, think of the awful tan lines. Anyway, so here we go.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's reframe the whole question here. What are the dangers of not cycling?
Right?
Now this is interesting because if you look at the top 10 causes of early death, cycling helps prevent 5 of them through exercise: heart disease, lung cancer, strokes, diabetes.
You don't eat a steak while you're cycling?
I might, because exercise makes you hungrier. But recent studies show that being sedentary increases your chance of death by a large margin. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
I've actually gotten a treadmill desk recently to get off my butt more. So I'm taking this very seriously. But being sedentary is really, really bad. And when you take all the health benefits and risks into account, one study showed that cycling is better than not cycling 20 to 1.
Okay, so you should cycle.
So for the mathematically disinclined, 2 to 1 would be twice as good. Twice as good as not cycling. And 20 to 1 is really, really good. So, all right, so let's get back to helmets. We've established cycling safer than driving, or just as safe. Now, what people usually counter with is, okay, but if you get into an accident, you're safer wearing a helmet, right? Okay, well, maybe, but the data are a little bit confusing at this point. Some studies show that helmets help when you get into an accident, okay? But here's the other interesting thing. Helmets actually increase certain head injuries this way. A lot of injuries are rotational injuries. And your head is effectively larger when you're wearing a helmet. So to think of an extreme example, imagine wearing like very big Viking horns on your head.
Nice.
And how many times you'd like wrench your head when you ran into a wall with those horns.
You'd wrench your head because girls are whistling at you because you're wearing a sweet ass Viking helmet when you're biking.
Because they're going to yell out, "You so horny," at them.
Hey, Viking!
So sometimes when you fall, your head instinctively pulls up from the road. But if you're wearing a helmet, the helmet might actually hit the road and torque your head. So, and a lot of injuries are like that. Now, bike helmets are made. A lot of people don't realize this. When people wear a helmet or they think about wearing a helmet, they're afraid of getting hit from behind by a car. But helmets are made to protect you from falling off of your bike and landing on top of your head. Okay, it's not made to withstand the impact of a windshield. It's certainly not made to withstand the impact of a windshield and then subsequently the road after you get hurled off of it. Okay, so it's made for falling off of a bike, right? And if you really care about your head on a bike, maybe you should wear a motorcycle helmet. But this gets back to like people are chuckling here in the room, and I said to my neighbor, why don't you wear a helmet when you drive? And she said, because I would look stupid. And it's just important to realize that wearing a helmet when you're biking is considered responsible and normal, and wearing a helmet in just as risky or more risky activities like driving or being in the shower or water skiing is considered unnatural and strange.
You would never get your hair clean if you wore a helmet in the shower. I'm just going to go out there and say
I'm going to get... this vanity thing is actually kind of important, which I'll get to in a sec.
Okay.
The data are a little weird, and there are studies for and against, so I'm not going to solve this kind of thing here. I will say, though, that looking at the question like this assumes that you're getting into an accident is the same whether or not you're wearing a helmet. Now, this is like, it's kind of like saying, well, if you're going to drive or you're going to cart, you should do it by the mile. There are psychological effects of wearing a helmet. Okay, so one thing is that there's risk compensation. Okay, risk compensation is basically when you behave differently according to how safe you feel. So if you're walking, here's an example. If you're walking in sneakers on a dry sidewalk, you are probably going to walk differently than if you're walking on a sheet of ice. Or if you're carrying something that's very fragile and precious. Okay? That's essentially risk compensation. So your mind makes this calculation of how safe you are, and it adjusts your behavior to accommodate that safety so that you maintain this acceptable level of risk. Now, the problem is that bike helmets don't do very much good. They're really not that effective, particularly for the things people are scared of, like getting hit by a car and the fatal things. But the problem is they give us a feeling of safety, and that is quite dangerous. As a result, people ride more dangerously when they're wearing helmets. So, and people are, well, not me, but yes, you. So what happens every time you want to ride off of a curb, can you make that light? How fast am I going to? Every one of those decisions is subconsciously affected by your perception of safety. And if you're a cyclist who wears a helmet, try going out without the helmet and tell me that your cycling doesn't change.
Right, and I think a lot of that's what you become accustomed to or what you grew up with. Because previously, when seatbelts came in, people did drive more recklessly and there were more car accidents. But it could be different for someone who was raised on seatbelts.
Yeah, I would never even think, I wouldn't have a way to drive without a seatbelt, right?
Right, but to Jim's point, if you purposely didn't put your seatbelt on, you'd probably be even more cautious. There's definitely some validity there. But I'm just saying, if someone grew up with a helmet, that might be their standard.
Right, so you're talking about, you just habituate to it and you act normal. I would like to see a study on that. I haven't seen one.
It'd be hard
to get the long scales.
Well, you can, there might be ways to, have somebody wear a helmet for a couple months and whatever. There might be a way to do it. But this isn't about seatbelts. But there is risk compensation for seatbelts, for football helmets, and it all depends on the data, right? So I've heard once that seatbelts actually don't save lives on the road. They protect the life of the driver, but the other deaths are passed on to pedestrians and passengers. But you guys can look at that in a future thing if you want to, because I can't speak definitively on that. But risk compensation will happen whenever there's safety. The trick is that safety has to be greater than the perceived safety.
Yes. Which is tricky. But typically humans accept a certain level of risk and then they adapt accordingly.
And people need to be more afraid.
Yes.
Otherwise, the terrorists win?
Yeah. So one guy in Britain found that when he wore a helmet, he did a study, when he wore a helmet, cars rode 6 inches closer to him.
So for the drivers,
So
too.
even if you can overcome risk compensation, which I doubt, you got drivers driving 6 inches closer to you. Now, I do have to say that this was not double blind. The guy who did the study was the guy riding the bike. So maybe he rode farther from the curb when he was wearing a helmet, but that's that.
I imagine it would also be safer to be a child, or appear to be a child, or something like that.
Right, and I told this to some of my students, and they said, "Oh, I wear headphones. I don't even have music. I just wear headphones, and people really stay out of my way."
Or, yeah, something like that. Or you have like a sign that says, "I am a lawyer and a jerk."
And I've heard.
King.
I don't know if this is true, but I've heard of people weaving a bit more on their bike just to look more unpredictable, so cars will give them a wider berth.
Oh wow!
And what's interesting is my perspective is that for most cars, they give bikes an unnecessarily wide berth.
Well, as a cyclist, I
disagree.
Don't find
right? Because I think people go out of their way.
Some of them do, but some of them buzz you.
It doesn't matter that 9/10 of drivers give too much room to the bike. It's the other jerk off who doesn't.
But all of these things about risk compensation are explanations for an effect that might not be there. But the fact is there. Okay, the proof is in the statistics. The rate of head injury increased 40% as helmets got more popular. Risk of head injury.
Yeah.
So this means that even your head is. So when people say, "Well, you're safer wearing a helmet rather than not," well, no. It's actually, you're more likely to get your head hurt wearing a helmet, it appears to me. Now, there are a whole lot of studies out there that you might hear of. Even the city of Ottawa, they go out there and they try to promote helmets, and they'll talk about these studies where bike head accidents went down after a helmet law was introduced. This is true. But if you look at this closely, it's because they reduce cycling. Okay, so what happens is, cycling goes down whenever you put in a helmet law. People are less likely to cycle. All right, and given what we know already, that is terrible for public health. Yeah. So if wearing a bike helmet is bad, bike helmet laws are really bad. And you would not believe how many studies get peer-reviewed and published that try to conclude that since injuries went down, that the helmet law was good, without looking at the rate and the probability of getting into an accident.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, I know how to eliminate all cycling accidents. You just make cycling illegal and you enforce it. Isn't that perfect? That's basic. That's a stronger version of what these helmet laws do. The other thing is, this is going to sound kind of silly, but people don't like wearing helmets. That's why they are less likely to cycle. And people who want their hair to look good, this was even mentioned on the podcast, right?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
a lot of women, people, if you have a job where you have to look good, wearing a helmet can really bother you. And I just read a recent study, 50% of London cyclists cited vanity and inconvenience as a reason they don't wear helmets when cycling. So promoting
citing safety.
It should be citing this segment on the reality check.
Don't know.
So promoting helmet use decreases cycling, and that is a terrible thing for public health. And all this hubbub, helmets come up all the time when we talk about bike safety, and it really gets my goat because the safest. First of all, cycling's not dangerous; it's already safe. But one of the best ways to make cycling safer is to have more people cycle. With the more bicycles are on the road, the more drivers are used to it, and they accommodate for it, and everybody's health gets better. So the helmet thing is really a red herring that is distracting from the real issues at best, and could cause more injuries at worst. So my conclusion is, don't wear a helmet.
And start biking.
And please just get on a bike. It's fun. It's healthful. It's great.
So, Jim, basically you're saying that regardless, assuming that I don't care about my hair, I don't care about how long it'll take to put on the helmet or anything like that, just if I have to make the decision tomorrow morning of whether or not to wear a helmet, you're saying I'm actually safer to not wear the helmet.
Absolutely. The risk of head injury goes up if you're wearing a helmet.
Wow.
And I would say, as Jim did a great job, the context of everything matters. Like what people perceive as risk, what people perceive as dangerous. We've all accepted cars are going to kill a certain amount of people. But when you look at the numbers, they're staggering. And we know most people feel terrorism when they should fear driving and traffic accidents and so on. And in this case, Elan, it's almost the question is, well, would you wear a helmet if you were driving a car? Again, it's that big context.
No, but I'm not driving a car.
That's a different question.
Yeah, no, it is a different question, but he's asking should he wear a helmet or not, and then you almost have to gauge Elan's notion of what risk is or what does it matter. Should he wear a motorcycle helmet tomorrow?
I'm sure, Elan,
right?
you get in a taxi once in a while, right?
Elan's question was, am I safer wearing a bike helmet than not wearing a bike helmet?
Yeah, assuming there's zero cost to wearing the helmet.
My answer is you're less safe.
And I personally find that suspect, even though you have that stat, just because I would think in some instances, if Elan is hit and falls, it is better to wear a helmet. It's just hard to...
But Jim's saying I'm less likely to get hit if I don't wear a helmet.
He's saying you're more likely to get hit because you're wearing a helmet.
And the trick to not dying on the road is avoiding accidents, not treating accidents as inevitable.
Right. So will Elan be engaging in riskier behavior? That's hard to say. We supposedly think drivers will treat him with less safety, right?
But what you don't want to happen is to not wear a helmet and then get in an accident and die, and then have all your friends and family be like, "You should have worn a helmet." And then from the grave, you'll just be like, "No, listen to the reality check episode 221."
When like the study came out of Toronto a while back, and they had me on the CBC talking about this, and they were. I looked at some news clips, and they were like, of all the people that died on the road on bike accidents, only 33% were wearing helmets. And I was thinking, oh, if they had their way, 100% of the people who died on the road would be wearing helmets. Wouldn't that be great? Because really, it's the helmet doesn't do much. I just hate to say it.
What was the reaction when you were on CBC, Jim?
Well, I didn't want to get into risk compensation because I only had like 5 minutes, and risk compensation's not an easy thing to get your mind around.
Yeah.
So I just basically was saying that cycling's not dangerous and it's as safe as cars. I basically did the first half of this kind of thing.
It's certainly true that most of the studies you read are just sketchy right away. They use some poor correlation or some bad data, and the conclusion is very big in the headline that says, helmets this, but you look into it and it just falls apart.
Yeah. And a lot of bike accidents are alcoholic people who've gotten their licenses taken away. And you need a way to get around.
Previous drivers.
Yeah, previous drivers still driving drunk, this time on a bike.
I find when I see the person on the bike smoking, I always kind of cracks me up.
Yeah, I'm coming back from the beer store.
There you go.
That's tricky, holding the beer case on them.
They do
handles. Yeah, I know. I see it. The college kids out here.
So are you convinced, Elon?
I don't know. It's like, I mean, the thing is, it's hard to know. Like, you're presenting data at the same time. It's like, a helmet. Well, I guess obviously the reason why this is an interesting segment is because it's counterintuitive. Like, you would think that a helmet is safer, and the reason I don't wear a helmet is just because I tend to just, I don't know, I'm negligent or whatever. Like,
Wait, now, careful. Now, when you say intuitive, keep in mind this is a very cultural intuition.
Yeah.
And if you
of course, yeah, and I understand that. Like, I was brought up being told you should wear a helmet.
Exactly, right. And
why is it a cultural?
Well, because if you go to places like Copenhagen or China, nobody's wearing a helmet, and they think it's ridiculous.
No, I know, but the difference between getting in an accident with a helmet and not with a helmet, that's fairly intuitive.
Yeah, with the implied assumption the helmet does something.
You're on a bike, you have a helmet, you get in an accident. Does the helmet help you, or does it not help you? It's either going to help you, it's certainly not going to hurt you, and that's where my...
Actually, that's not certain, but because of the torsional
because
things,
of what you were saying, the torque factor, I've certainly understood. So, from my perspective, the only factor that you've offered between the difference of getting in an accident on a bicycle with a helmet or without a helmet is this torque factor. If you're telling me that the likelihood is that torque factor is more likely to hurt you with a helmet than without a helmet, then I'll accept that as something I need to look into. But short of that, I can't imagine how a helmet wouldn't help.
No, and I'm not saying that it would. I'm not saying it would or wouldn't help you because the data are inconsistent. Because my argument is that you should be trying to avoid accidents, and that is why the helmet makes a difference. Even if the helmet would help you if you got in an accident, I'm willing to grant you that the helmet would help you if you got in an accident. That's fine. Go ahead and believe that. But still, as helmets, the head injury increases as helmet use goes up. So that protection isn't enough.
So you're saying that is as strictly as a result of people feeling safer because they have helmets on, and perhaps motorists being less cautious because the person is wearing a helmet?
That's the theory.
So I just want to say there's a slight difference of emphasis of what we're talking about that I think you just got to, Pat, was that one, if you were already in an accident and wearing the helmet is a different question than if you wear a helmet or not, like Elon asked tomorrow, should you or should you not? Because once you're already at the stage of the accident, you've already taken out the factors of risk for the cyclist as well as risk for the motorists and their compensation, right?
And a lot of scientists make this error. They look at people who show up at the ER. And if you look at people who show up at the ER, the people with helmets might have been doing better than the people without. But you didn't look at all the cyclists who didn't get into accidents because they weren't wearing helmets.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think also like a big point that Jim made, which we shouldn't overlook, is the fact that if people are choosing not to bike at all because of helmet laws.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I see people who drive to work, sit all day at work, and then they tell me I'm being unhealthy by biking without a helmet. It's crazy.
Complicated stuff, man.
Yeah, I just want to say it is very complicated, and even like it's hard to get the data on those people who you can't track. The people who get in an accident and the helmet helped them, but it was not fatal, nor did they tell anyone. Or the people who, as it's very hard, is that because they didn't wear a helmet, they didn't engage in certain risk compensation, therefore they didn't have an accident. So it's really hard to get all these counterfactual possibilities, and even the other data that just escapes normal notice because it's not severe enough, right?
Interesting segment. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
Once again, after recording that segment, there was a little more debate about the topic, and we've talked about it a lot since. I'm not a huge bike rider, but I still found myself asking friends occasionally, do they wear bike helmets? What do they think of the safety? What do they think of the research? One bit of feedback that I've gotten more recently, which was only briefly touched on in the topic, was what other people will think of you if you do get in an accident. If someone gets in a fatal accident while not wearing a helmet, the perception of the person's friends, family, and public will invariably be that the person not wearing the helmet is somewhat responsible. There's an assumption that bike helmets improve safety, and so there's an assumption that if someone wasn't wearing one, then they're kind of irresponsible or not being safe. The evidence doesn't really factor into it. This is just how people think because of sort of how our culture feels about bike helmets. So I hope you listeners enjoyed this mashup about TRC panelists disagreeing about all kinds of stuff. I just want to remind you guys that we're not always sort of nodding our heads and talking into this echo chamber. There is some disagreement, but that is occasional, and we usually do agree about the main things, the main ideas of critical thinking and skepticism. We'll likely be off again next week, but we should be back to doing shows real soon. Until next time, peace out, cuboids.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.